The slap echoed louder than it should have, not because of the force but because of who it landed on. The downtown street wasn't particularly busy. A late afternoon sky smeared with gray. A sidewalk scattered with impatient footsteps and cardboard coffee cups. Just noise. Until that sound. Open palm. One clean strike. And silence followed it. The man who delivered it wore a badge and too much ego. Uniform too crisp. Belt too full. Anger burning behind aviator lenses. He hadn't even looked up to see who he was hitting. The man he struck stood still. Not because he couldn't retaliate, but because something in the air froze. Jason Statham didn't even blink, but the street changed around him. A waitress across the street stopped stacking chairs. A cyclist let his foot drag. A teenage girl on the bus held her breath. Time slowed because the universe suddenly realized what had just happened. But that's not where this story began. Not exactly. The rewind isn't obvious. It doesn't start with text on screen or dreamy flashbacks. It folds inward, like tension tightening under skin. Because a few hours earlier, Jason Statham had simply walked into the city with no intention to start a war. He was there to meet someone, an old mechanic, veteran, widower, two grandsons, heart failure slowly killing him from the inside. They used to serve together, quiet operations. Files that had since been deleted. But the bond wasn't paper. It was blood, oil, and desert wind. The mechanic had asked Jason Statham for one favor: help his grandson get back on track. That's why Jason Statham showed up at the bus terminal. That's why he waited 3 hours without saying a word, and that's how he noticed the cops. Not normal patrol, not routine stops. These were the kind that moved in packs, spoke in whispers, and looked for excuses. Their cruiser didn't even park right. They swerved into the curb like they owned it, and when they spotted a kid in a hoodie near the ticket kiosk, they locked in like wolves on a limp deer. Jason Statham stayed seated, for now. The kid didn't resist, didn't talk back, didn't even fit the description. But that didn't matter to Officer Burnett. Burnett was one of those cops who never made headlines because he picked his spots too well. Poor neighborhoods, low camera traffic, paperwork that always read non-compliant subject. His badge didn't shine from duty, it gleamed from cowardice. And when Burnett saw the kid step back nervously, he advanced fast, too fast, shoved him against the ticket machine, pulled his arm without reason. That's when Jason Statham stood. No words, no raised hands, just movement. He crossed the bus terminal's open floor with calm steps, the kind that always came before earthquakes. Burnett turned, puffed up, and got loud. The other officers stepped in behind him. Crowd tension rose. And when Jason Statham stepped between the kid and the badge, Burnett didn't ask questions. He slapped. There it was again. The echo. Even birds overhead seemed to stop flapping. Jason Statham tilted his head slightly. Not in anger, just calculation. He looked at Burnett's belt, noticed the misplaced taser, the double-holstered spray, the trembling right hand. He wasn't scared. He was breaking. Because Burnett had just struck the wrong man in front of too many people, and fate was watching now. 3 bystanders were already filming. One girl live-streamed, her caption: "This cop just slapped a stranger, update, stranger is not normal." Burnett sensed it too late, his pulse betrayed him. His voice cracked mid-threat. The other officers held back, unsure why the air felt heavy. But Jason Statham didn't swing, not yet. Instead, he turned back to the kid, lifted his hoodie carefully, checked for bruising, then helped him sit. The crowd murmured, Burnett barked orders. Jason Statham straightened, and something in his eyes shut off, not rage, precision. He reached for Burnett's wrist, the same one that delivered the slap. In one twist, 2 joints cracked. Burnett's shout was stifled by the concrete wall as Jason Statham pinned him against it without breaking stride. The crowd went silent again. No screams, no cheers. Just that collective realization. They had no idea who this man was, but Burnett knew now, not by name, by control. He tried reaching for his baton. Jason Statham disarmed him with a flick and dropped it behind the bench like discarded trash. By the time backup sirens flared from 3 blocks away, it was too late. The incident was already viral. The caption had changed. Jason Statham. His face had finally been caught by the 3rd camera, the wide-angle one from the smoothie shop window. Internet users began scrambling to confirm. Was that really him? Was this staged? Was that the guy from— No, not just the guy from the movies, the real one. the man who hadn't been in public view for over 4 years, the one whose files were sealed behind defense clearance and black tape. And here he was, protecting a kid. Officer Burnett, now curled at the base of the wall, looked up with tears in his eyes, not from pain, from the awareness that his career, his illusion of control, had just ended in front of the entire world. Jason Statham didn't stay. He turned to the crowd and nodded at the kid's older brother, who had just arrived, then disappeared into the alley behind the terminal. No chase, no arrests, just questions left echoing louder than the slap itself. Some say Jason Statham returned to the old mechanic's garage that night. Others say he boarded a private train north using a ticket that wasn't registered in any system. One thing was clear: he wasn't just back, he had never really left. And now that the world had seen what happened when someone crossed that invisible line, the line between disrespect and reckoning, they couldn't look away. Because this wasn't a comeback, this was the beginning of something no badge could silence. The fallout didn't take days. It took minutes. The slap hadn't just landed on Jason Statham's face, it had landed in the center of a digital firestorm. By the time Burnett slouched against that terminal wall nursing a twisted wrist, the footage was everywhere. Surveillance cam angles, civilian live streams, traffic poll captures. 3 continents had already seen the face of the man who didn't flinch when slapped, and whose restraint carried more threat than any outburst. But Jason Statham wasn't watching the internet. He was standing in a cramped garage under 3rd and Delmer. The old mechanic's radio played low jazz. Broken fans rattled overhead. Jason Statham leaned over the hood of a rusted-out Pontiac, tightening bolts like nothing had happened. But behind him, the mechanic watched him with quiet worry. Word had spread, not through media, through networks. The kind that operated on silence and signals. Ex-operatives, contractors, agents without allegiances. The ones who recognized posture, breath control, and the weight of calm. They had seen the footage, and they knew Jason Statham hadn't acted yet. Inside a precinct 2 districts away, Burnett sat in a holding room for observation. Not punishment, just image control. The department didn't want questions about him. They wanted the incident to pass, but it didn't, because Jason Statham never pressed charges, never filed a report, never gave an interview, and that silence felt louder than guilt. Across the city, small shifts happened fast. A civilian oversight committee quietly demanded officer camera logs, but 2 were corrupted. The captain in charge of Burnett's squad issued a formal apology and went on leave the next day. Recruitment at the academy dropped by 18% in under 48 hours. None of this was coordinated by Jason Statham, but everything pointed back to him. At the same time, Jason Statham returned to the boy he had protected. The kid's name was Aaron, barely 17, skittish, grew up in foster care after his mom disappeared. The mechanic's grandson. Jason Statham didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He sat across from Aaron at the back of a diner and just watched. Aaron couldn't hold his gaze for long, not out of fear, out of confusion. He didn't understand why this man had stepped in, why someone like that would care. Jason Statham broke eye contact and looked out the window. Outside, 2 men stood by a black SUV, suits too formal for the neighborhood, watching. They weren't local cops, they weren't press. They were Zurich Recovery Division, private firm, ex-military backgrounds known for quiet resolutions. They had been sent to assess the risk Jason Statham posed after the footage went public. Their assessment, one word: uncontainable, so they tried containment anyway. That night the SUV pulled up just as Jason Statham stepped out of the diner. One man approached calmly, offering a card with no emblem. Jason Statham didn't take it. He just looked at it and walked past. That's when the second man stepped in, arm extended, blocking the sidewalk. Jason Statham didn't pause, he shifted. One hand pushed the man's wrist away. Not with force, with absolute dismissal, and the man stumbled, off balance, shaken, like he had touched a live wire. The SUV door stayed open behind them, waiting for Jason Statham to comply. He never did. He crossed the street instead, and disappeared behind the post office. Inside Zurich HQ, that incident was logged under Encounter Code D, translation: do not engage. Meanwhile, Burnett was given a script to read. He stood before a green screen studio set up to look like a real precinct. Behind him, a sincere banner in front of him, a teleprompter with apology lines. He tried to read them, but halfway through he broke, eyes darted. Sweat rose. He stopped mid-sentence and walked off camera. The clip aired anyway, and the world saw a broken man trying to fake an apology for something he knew he deserved. Jason Statham, back at the garage, adjusted a breaker box. The old mechanic lit a cigarette he wasn't supposed to and said what everyone had been thinking. That slap could have ended Burnett, could have turned into a war. Jason Statham just shook his head, because it wasn't about vengeance, it was about control, his control. And the fact that Burnett was still breathing, that wasn't mercy, it was warning. But not everyone got the message. Two rookie officers, part of Burnett's old circle, decided they could earn respect back. They waited outside the garage in an unmarked Crown Victoria, engine running. One clutched a service baton, the other a modified taser. They weren't here to arrest, they were here to restore pride. Jason Statham exited the garage quietly, wiped his hands on a rag, walked toward the car. The moment was still until they stepped out. The officer with the taser raised it and blinked. Jason Statham was already at his side. One grip, one flick of the wrist. The taser fell to the ground, sparking harmlessly. The second officer froze. Jason Statham looked at him once. That was enough. They both got back in the car. Drove off without a word. In Zurich's global database, Jason Statham's file was updated. Status: active presence confirmed. Recommendation: avoid escalation at all costs. That night, a candlelight vigil formed outside the terminal, not for a death, but for a realization. People gathered not because someone was gone, but because someone had shown them what it looked like when power was confronted by principle. A mural went up within 24 hours, not a painted portrait, just a stencil of Jason Statham's outline with 3 words beneath it. He didn't flinch. Jason Statham stood 1 block away watching the crowd. He didn't smile. He didn't stay. He turned, walked toward the metro and vanished into the dark. Because this story wasn't about what happened in that terminal. It was about what didn't happen afterward. No revenge, no riots. Just one man's silent mastery of consequence, and the world watching. It had been 72 hours since the slap. No court date, no lawsuit, no press conference, but something else happened. Something bigger than paperwork or punishment. The world shifted. And Officer Burnett wasn't the only one losing sleep over it. Inside the headquarters of the airline Artis Air, a boardroom full of executives stared at a single paused frame on a screen. It wasn't from the terminal slap. It was from 2 weeks earlier, a first-class lounge at Heathrow. The image: Jason Statham, unshaven in a gray travel jacket, sitting calmly in the waiting area, while a uniformed attendant stood above him pointing toward economy. Back then, they hadn't recognized him. They'd told him the seat was overbooked. They said the list was full. They didn't care that he had already checked in, that his name was in the system, that he said nothing as they downgraded him. All they saw was a man who looked tired, and they assumed less. The manager even smirked when he handed over the economy ticket. Jason Statham had said nothing. Just stood, nodded once, and walked down the wrong aisle of the plane without a word. That clip wasn't public, not yet. But it had been quietly leaked by a whistleblower inside the airline's IT division once they saw who was involved in the slap incident. And now Artis Air's legal department was panicking, because the same man who had become the face of silent retaliation, the one who didn't sue, didn't shout, didn't flinch, had been mistreated by them first, and if the public found out, the financial consequences would be immediate. Jason Statham didn't plan this. He wasn't manipulating headlines. He was just back to work, at the city's public training ground, helping train rescue divers in low-visibility conditions. No spotlight, no paycheck, just sweat, cold water, and mentorship. But while he was underground, the surface world caught fire. One freelance journalist got her hands on the Heathrow footage. She released it with the title, "The Airline That Disrespected the Man Who Changed the World with a Glance." It went viral in under 6 minutes. By the end of the day, Artis Air stock dropped 17%. 3 board members resigned. 47,000 first-class customers canceled upcoming flights in protest. 2 celebrities tweeted they'd never fly the airline again. All because of a quiet man in a gray jacket who hadn't even raised his voice. Back in the city, Officer Burnett tried to transfer precincts. He was denied. Every station saw him as a liability now, not because of what he did, but because of what Jason Statham didn't do in return. The power imbalance had flipped, and now Burnett couldn't stand under any badge without flinching at shadows. Meanwhile, the mural of Jason Statham began showing up in other places: train stations, graffiti underpasses, a children's wall in a martial arts school. Always the same silhouette. Always the same phrase. He didn't flinch. Jason Statham never acknowledged the art. He simply kept moving. Today he was back at the garage. The old mechanic wasn't in, had gone to the hospital for a heart checkup. So Jason Statham fixed the exhaust on a customer's sedan. When Aaron showed up with his younger cousin, Jason paused. The cousin was bruised, schoolyard fight. Aaron muttered something about older kids. Jason didn't scold. He just nodded at the bench and handed the kid a cold soda, then went back to work. But across the street, something stirred. Two of Burnett's former allies, plainclothes off duty, watched from inside a parked van. They hadn't let it go in their minds. Jason Statham had made their brother look weak. And weakness wasn't tolerated. They weren't here to kill him, just to hurt him, make a point. Remind him that the street still belonged to the badge. They got out of the van slow. One held a crowbar inside his jacket. The other wore gloves. No prints. They crossed the street with careful steps. Aaron saw them first and froze. Jason Statham didn't look up. Not until the crowbar left the jacket. And then, everything changed. The one with the crowbar never made it past his second step. Jason Statham grabbed the rusted jack handle from the garage floor, spun once, and tapped the man's knee with precision. It didn't break. It collapsed. The man fell with a yell that was swallowed by traffic noise. The other lunged forward. Big mistake. Jason Statham pivoted, used the attacker's own motion to turn him into the side of the van. No blood, no screams, just pure, efficient, silent damage. By the time the cops arrived, the two men were sitting quietly on the curb, groaning. Jason Statham was nowhere in sight, just a note on the windshield of the van: "You already lost." Later that night, a former MI6 contact posted a single line on a secure forum: "Statham is active." But he's not seeking, he's responding. That message spread through channels faster than any alert. Black sites flagged it. Contractors canceled operations near his known zones. Jason Statham had become the storm you avoid, not because he's vengeful, but because he carries silence like a weapon. Back at the hospital, the old mechanic was being discharged. He limped out of the elevator to find Jason Statham already waiting beside the vending machine. No conversation. Just a small paper bag with fresh socks and a receipt for the garage parts he'd ordered on his behalf. The mechanic said thank you. Jason Statham simply nodded. Outside, the vigil had grown. A small sculpture had been erected where the mural once stood, metal forged into the shape of a closed fist resting gently on a bench. It wasn't aggressive. It was steady, controlled, the way Jason Statham had always been. The airline never recovered. In just 6 weeks, Artis Air filed for bankruptcy reorganization. Not from a lawsuit, from abandonment. Public trust had vanished. And all because they slapped away a seat from the wrong man. No press heard from Jason Statham. No TV deal. No brand endorsement. Just shadows. And the memory of what happens when you cross someone who doesn't need power. Because he already is power.